Nicole, how are you, lovely?
Good, my friend. How are you?
That's so good. I'm excellent. What have you been up to today?
Today, actually, I presented our quarterly targets to the team today, which is one of my um, favorite parts of being a leader is being able to bring the strategy down from our massive target of engaging 350 million people into a 90-day action plan that everyone can get excited about and own. And we chose that quarterly theme, which is synergy. It was velocity last quarter. And I feel like we really got there right in the last couple of weeks of the quarter. There was a lot of velocity. So it's really about setting the energetic and the intention for how the team's gonna flow. And I'm really excited about creating tight synergy in the team, and they seem to love it. So I'm feeling really great about that. I'm feeling clear, I'm feeling motivated, and yeah, that's been my day.
That's so awesome. Correct me if I'm wrong. You said 350 million people.
Yeah, in the message of love by the end
That
of the
is that is crazy. I can't even comprehend that many people. So,
year.
and that's in all forms, like all countries, everywhere, spreading the message of love.
Yeah, it's 350 million is 4%, which is a critical mass point. So that's why we choose this number. That the whole strategy theory behind the movement is if we engage enough people that it hits a point of critical mass, then there'll be an irreversible momentum that will shift humanity out of fear forever and into love.
I love that, and well, love that. And and so I guess needed right now with what's going on and a lot of the fear that's going around. But I will delve into that very soon. You do so many things. You're a speaker. You're a unifier, a messenger of love, a CEO, an author, and just such an awesome human. I met you last year at Wild Success on stage, and I'm pretty sure you tried to sell me off for a date. Um,
Did it work?
no, no. But I did meet a lot of amazing people that day, which was amazing. And that's where I first got to meet you, but then also see you speak and also share your message on love. And it was impactful, and that's why you have so many people that resonate with what you say and are deeply impacted because you do share such a powerful message. So for the people that don't know who you are and don't know much about your story, because I don't know too much either, can you give us a wrap up of your life from where you started to where you are now and all the things that you do?
It's a big question, Colin. Just your life story. The summary.
Yep.
Okay, well, I'll touch on what I feel to be the most important parts, I suppose. Beginning with my childhood. I had a very unconventional childhood. I grew up between here and the UK. I experienced a lot of change, a lot of transition. So no wonder that the change process and the vulnerability that we experience in the face of change and the inability to change often are reoccurring themes in my work on the journey of helping people embrace love. So often fear comes when we're asked to change, when we're asked to evolve, when we're asked to step into new aspects of ourselves and re-envision what it means to live. These are all the sorts of conversations I find myself having with people day to day. And I had a crash course in that growing up. I went to about 10 different schools. I left a mainstream school when I was 14 to pursue performance, which was my passion, acting. I studied in a style of theatre called Meisner, which I didn't realize at the time, but was founded on what I now see to be very, very spiritual principles. So the premise of Meisner was to be 100% yourself under the given imaginary circumstances. So to explain that, a lot of acting, a lot of people think about acting and they think you're acting. You're stepping into a character, you're learning that character, and this character is separate to you as a human being and your identity. Well, the principle of Meisner was, who would you be as this person? Who would you be as a murderer? Who would you be as a rapist? Who would you be as a stealer? Who would you be as a liar? And the training kind of forces you to confront these really controversial elements that exist within all of us. And what it awoke me to was really we're all things. And the deeper you go into this practice, the deeper you realize this art form, the deeper you realize that all of us are all things. All of this exists within inside of us. And really what it comes down to is our choice. And in order to become really prolific at this art form, you really need to be able to shed your identity, because there's aspects of your identity that are always going to be, you know, as a good person, as a moral human being, in a conflict when you're asked, who would you be if you were this person? So a lot of the training is about breaking down those ego constructs, breaking down what identity actually was. It awoke me to understand that we're not actually our identity, that identity is something that we create, it's something that we choose, and it's not actually what we are. Underneath all of that, we are completely unbounded. The human spirit is limitless. And what it also taught me was the most powerful work I believe any of us can ever do as a human being is to be fully witnessed in our humanity, which was often the process our director would take us through in, you know, refining our art form. Was how comfortable are you just being witnessed as you, and not acting and not deflecting and not whatever. So there were some really powerful principles during those 3 years that I studied at the academy. That was one of the most profound times in my life, because I was spending every single day, you know, during the years where so many other teenagers were forming identities and I guess focusing on a range of other things that wasn't really in my periphery. I was deep, you know, in my study of this art form, but I was also struggling severely with an eating disorder that wasn't really caught until a really critical point, because one, it was very cultural in the sort of opportunities I was pursuing, performance, modeling, so on. And two, mental health was still really stigmatized. And through the lens of a 16-year-old, I was interpreting the lack of conversation that people would have with me around what was very evidently a challenge that I was experiencing. Unlike many mental health challenges, what I was going through was very obvious. It was physical. It manifested physically. And you know, the absence of people leaning in to ask if I was okay, or if they could support me, or what I was going through, I interpreted as people didn't care. I was invisible. I wasn't loved. And as I went on my journey of becoming a messenger of love and being curious and fascinated about people and working with people, the more I realized that it actually wasn't a reflection of me at all. It was a reflection of their own fears. And this kind of woke me up to realizing that everything in our life is just a mirror of our internal construct, is a mirror of our, you know, wherever we're coming from on the inside. And during that period in my life, I was extremely vulnerable and fragile. I was also deemed to be very talented. And there are a lot of elements that I think were probably a very confrontational mirror for people to lean into. On one hand, they were sort of intimidated perhaps by my talent. On the other hand, they were just really shit scared of being present with the truth of the vulnerability and the fragility that I was going through. And in understanding this, it allowed me to heal from an illness that statistically not many people heal from. And it also gave me a launching pad to pursue the work that I do now in the world, even though over the years it's iterated and changed. The first entrepreneurial pursuit I went into was starting a nonprofit that worked in mental health. And 10 years ago, approaching mental health in the way that I was approaching mental health was considered extremely alternative and quite radical, which was founded on the premise, perhaps, these mental health challenges that so many people are experiencing but no one's talking about are a result of our culture and our environment. And the leading thought back then was very much, this is a biological predisposition and this is something you'll only ever manage and never recover from. And I just didn't believe it. So being the radical 18-year-old I was, in a pursuit to find the truth, I spent my life savings on a van and I started traveling to communities and giving talks and holding spaces where people could come and talk about what was real. And the work was very simple. It was founded on premises that really should be common sense, but they're often not common practice. Like, this is a space where there's no judgment. This is a space where there's no opinions or advice. This is just a space where people can come and be seen in what's real for them. Long story short, that tour ended up being a 2-year tour. I had a team by the end of it, and we worked directly with over 50,000 people in 300 communities around Australia, and was sponsored by Sun Super to do so. The campaign became really big. It was called Sun Super Champions for Change. And I was exposed to a lot of humanity in that time through so many different diverse, individuals and communities, from really low socioeconomic to corporate, and to political, and everything in between. And what I started to notice was, these differences that we've been sold, the idea of, like, this person's better than you because they make more money, or they're a man, or they're older, or whatever it is, it just faded away, because the space that was created wasn't about any of that. It was about what was true and what was real. And what I realized, and I'm very blessed that I got exposed to this at such a young age, is that there's so much more of what makes us the same than what separates us. And the details of our story are all different, but fundamentally we all want the same thing, which is to be seen and heard, and to love and be loved. And I knew after those 2 years that this was my life's work. And things really started to change for me after that time. I won a series of really amazing awards, like finalist for Young Australian of the Year, and had the honour of winning the Pride of Australia medal, which was super amazing. And Westpac listed me as top 100 most influential women before I was 21. And then the government asked me to become a commissioner for the Commonwealth, advising the PM on how to spend the budget for mental health, which was a wild ride, and again exposed me to a really, really diverse landscape of, where we fall down really in well-being and community development, and just how often our systems lack a human touch, and lack being human-centered. So through that time, I served for 4 years. I was still running my nonprofit. By that point, we were being commissioned to do bigger community development projects, and solving what's called wicked problems. So problems that have more than one contributing factor. So a community might call us and say, we have a really high suicide rate, can you come and fix it? Or we have a really low unemployment rate, or none of the kids go to school in our community. So what we were doing is looking at cross-sectionality, and how to bring communities together and create unified vision. And again, like, this work was fascinating because all of it was just about hearing and seeing each other. Like 99% of the time, the community's problem just came down to no one was feeling appreciated, understood, seen and heard, and believing that they wanted different things when actually they wanted the same thing. They just had different ways of communicating that. So it taught me a lot about conflict resolution. It taught me a lot about human beings, what motivates us, so many different things. And by the end of those next 4 years of the journey, it was just crystal clear to me that the answer was really as simple as love. So I decided to take a step back from all of it, retire at 23 from colourful career in mental health, and focus on building the world's largest love-based movement, which is what I do today.
Whoa. Okay. That's crazy, and such a wild journey and I'm here sitting going, oh, this happened over a period of many years, and started in your 20s and stuff, but you were only 18 when you started that tour.
Yeah.
So what was it, why, or what inspired you to go do that? Was anything planned? Was it just like, okay, I'm just going to go here and figure it out? Was there a long-term vision on the end of that, of like, I'm going to build a not-for-profit and write a book and all that? Or was it just, this is what I'm inspired to do right now?
I was always inspired to create a nonprofit, and I was building the nonprofit as I was touring.
Yep.
And I knew 100% through my own experiences going through the mental health system, that we just weren't approaching it the right way. And, I guess the fire behind the tour wasn't even to bring what I thought to be the answer to communities. It was actually to find out what the truth was, because I grew up in a culturescape, a context where the truth was always hidden. It was never talked about. How people actually felt was never clear, was never there. And it's crazy when I look back, because I think about who I surround myself with now and my beautiful team and my friends, and they're also in touch and sensitive and emotionally aware. And I think back to then, and I thought I was the only human being in the world that had feelings. So it was very much I was taking a punt. It was a risk. I was like, surely I'm not the only one. And I guess my story and that journey that I experienced almost cost me my life. And the sense in me was I couldn't reconcile the feeling that because of our absence of courage as individuals to have conversations that are difficult and confrontational, that might result in teenagers losing their lives, and any human losing their life. To me, that wasn't something that I could just ignore. It wasn't. I couldn't go and get a normal job and pretend like, I couldn't unsee what I saw through my experience, I guess. And yeah, that's where it began. Like, honestly, if you had told me at that point, this is what would be involved in what you're about to, execute, I don't know how I would have felt about it, but I was just following my instinct. And I guess that so many people said to me at the time, if you want to make change and have social impact, create a career first and then give back when you've made it. And I think, I'm so happy I didn't listen to that advice, because there were so many benefits of me being young and being naive, and I just had so much energy and so much to give to my mission. And I think about the life I get to live now, 10 years on, and the sort of leader that I get to be and the lifestyle I get to live from taking those risks and being fully self-made. I'm just so grateful that I listened to my heart through it all.
Yeah, and it's so impressive, and very similar in that when I was 18, it was a similar sort of thing of like going and chasing my dream. Whereas a lot of people, including my parents, were like, no, go study for the next 5 years and then make it in a career, then do the things you really want to do. And I was like, no, it doesn't sit with me. Like, I want to do it now. And maybe that's the impatience in me that's like, no, I want to have it now. I want to do it. Full of energy, full of motivation and drive. And yeah, to where I am now, it's like I'm so happy I didn't, because even though there was a lot of failures and mistakes along the way, and I had to adapt and pivot, especially on shedding different identities, but then also stepping into different things and trying different things. It allowed me to get to where I am now, and I think it fast tracked a lot for me to be building a movement and company as well. When you were touring, and you said that a big problem was, or something that people were wanting, was just to be seen and heard, and that's where they became understanding. How does that then correlate to the message of love? Is it that when you're seen and heard, you feel loved?
It's a great question. I guess the first thing I want to speak to is some of the myths I think that exist around love. Number one, that love isn't a romanticized idea. Sorry to burst your bubble. Any persons that believe that's what love is, even though it can take romantic form. Love really is a state of being. It's a vibration, and this is what I've uncovered in my work, is that we are love. And how I've concluded that is when you hold people in a space that's non-judgmental, when you allow, when you give a space that is essentially completely free. It's not convoluted or complicated with opinions, advice, and projections and judgments. An open space, which is a space of love, people will naturally heal. People will naturally have epiphanies and transformations. And I noticed that the less I did, like the less doing that happened in the space, the more profound the results. And it showed me that love is already what you are. And it's not even that we have to find it. It's not that we have to chase it. We just have to give it space to emerge. And it really is a process of undoing the fears, undoing the conditions, undoing the limitations. And underneath all of that is your true nature, which is just completely limitless, as love is. I often give the example, when you think about people that you love, if they were to move to the other side of the world, or if they were to pass away, you don't stop loving them. Love really is a frequency and a state of being that is so far beyond these confines of time and space. And this is incredible. It's such an incredible part of being a human being. Is this is the source we come from. This is the source that we return to, and this is what we get to live in if we choose to walk that path of alignment and not give in to the fears that we've been sold over and over and over again growing up in our cultures.
Yeah. So why do so many people, I guess, act from a state of fear and not naturally from a state of love?
Great question. The only thing to fear is fear itself. And how can I articulate this in its simplest way? I might share a metaphor. So when I bungee jumped for the first time, I had a really profound realization around the nature of fear. I was in Costa Rica, and through these unforeseen circumstances, I met a man on the trek that I was on, and he invited me to come and do the bungee jump. And heights was my biggest fear. Like, it was beyond a fear. It was I would say it was more like a phobia, to the point that even standing on a high-rise balcony would give me total vertigo, and I would feel like I was going to pass out. But every time the universe presents me with something like this, I know that it's an invitation to expand myself and to become a big person. So I'm in such a habit of that now. It's very difficult to deny the call to adventure. So I found myself on this bungee jump in this developing country, which was not a normal Western bungee jump. It was looked pretty old, looked pretty rugged. Was in between a valley, so two mountains, and they pull you into the middle of the valley, and there's an 800-meter drop below you. So it was pretty terrifying, even for someone that didn't have a phobia of heights. And I was on the platform, and it was my turn to do the bungee jump. And there was about 10 steps between me and the edge of the bungee jump. And I just couldn't bring myself to even walk, let alone jump. And I was holding onto the guy that was the operation person for the bungee jump. And I was like, I think you're going to need to help me, because I just don't know how I'm actually going to do this. And sort of he got me up, and he didn't speak very good English. He was only speaking Spanish. And I was like, has anyone died doing this? And he was like, I'll tell you after. Like, completely so unhelpful. And I could feel the terror and the fear just rising, and my mind, I was just observing my mind. The gift of meditation is that you can start to actually slow down your thoughts and figure out what's going through your head. And I had already practiced that a lot by that point. So I was just noticing, observing the thoughts, these crazy thoughts, like all of these crazy reasons why I couldn't do it. And, you might relate, if you're listening, to, if you ever wanted to give your number to a guy or a girl, and when you're in a hesitation about that, all of these reasons to not do it start to just come into your mind, and they can start to get really ridiculous and crazy, as much as like, I have to go home immediately because I left the light switch on. It's just completely unrelated information that your mind starts to cling to not do the thing that you need to do, to not choose love in that moment, and to choose expansion. So I was noticing that, and I was like, shit, okay, I'm just going to have to take a couple of steps. Started coaching myself, take a step, take another step, take another step. And yet still I was feeling completely frozen. There was about 3 steps between me and the edge. But then I had this complete epiphany. I realized that I could have stood there, in my head, in fear, for another 5 minutes, 10 minutes, hour, 10 hours, decade, till the end of my life. And that monkey mind, all of those fears, were not only not going to go away, because it's the negotiation you can't win. Fear is literally a negotiation that you just cannot win against. The only way through it is to not negotiate with your fears, to not give it energy, to choose the opposite, to choose love in those moments. And when I realized that, it was actually the fear of it feeling worse was enough to like catapult me off the edge and into the bungee jump. And by the way, it was one of the most amazing feelings I've ever experienced. It was just total ecstasy. But the sentiment of this story, and how this links back to your question, was So many people spend their whole life on the edge of that bungee jump, thinking that the scariest bit is when they jump. And this is the greatest lie that you've ever been told, that the scariest bit is standing on the edge. This is the irony. We spend our whole life trying to protect ourselves and preserve ourselves from the scary bits, from the change, from the transformation. And yet, in the attempt to protect yourself from that, you are literally holding yourself in the scariest, hardest part, is that hesitation. As soon as you take the lead, that's when the fun starts. That's when you start to feel expansive. That's when there's like a feather bed there to catch you. And I think this is why people choose fear, going back to your question, instead of love, because they build this up. They've convinced themselves again and again that they're protecting themselves, that they're keeping themselves safe and secure by not taking those leaps of faith. But you're not alive when you're in that hesitation. You're paralyzed. You know, that's not what life is about. Life starts when you take the risk. Life starts when you take the jump. Life starts when you choose to love, when you choose to follow your heart. And it's not always going to be rational. It's not always going to make sense. In fact, if it makes sense and it's rational, you're probably not choosing love, because the path less traveled is never really going to be conventional, because you're the hero of that story. You're meant to pave out that adventure and that journey, and you're meant to create these crazy stories and to be an inspirational person. You know, so many people have said to me as a speaker, like, you have such amazing stories and you're so inspiring. And often what I'll say to them in response to that is, all that being inspiring is being within your spirit. That's what the word actually means, being within your spirit. And because I've stayed within my spirit and because I've stayed true to myself, the consequence of that is I've created a story that is inspiring to others. But all of us have the potential to do that. And all of us are going to be so unique in how that love and that inspiration wants to express itself through us. And that's our birthright. You know, your birthright is to follow that path, and you will be protected in that path. You will be supported in that path by a force so much greater than you, by a divinity that is completely impossible for your intellectual mind to understand. And fear and reason and logic are very closely linked in the human psyche. And I think we have a lot of systems, we have a lot of structures that have been built on logic, that have been built on reason. Even back in the day when philosophy was one of the leading, the most cutting edge ideologies in how we were going to evolve as a human race, within philosophy, reason, it was actually seen to be one of the less favorable ways to philosophize, because reason, you can only apply reason based on what you know to date. So it's a process of deduction. And the issue with that is there's so much that you don't know. You know, like there's an infinite amount of possibilities outside of reason. And the only way to uncover them is to take those risks and put yourself in situations that aren't reasonable, and to follow your heart.
Whoa, there's so much relatable in that. And I think one thing that flashed back to me was not standing on the edge of a cliff or a bungee jump. But for me, it was that massive leap at 19 to move overseas, to leave everything here and to go pursue my dream in soccer. In that journey, in that bus ride to the shopping center to go book the flight, I got in the shopping center and I had a massive, I didn't know what it was, but apparently it's a panic attack. My chest was hurting. I was on the ground. I'm like, I'm having a heart attack. Like, this is, the most uncomfortable experience of my life. I went to the hospital. The lady's like, okay, have a glass of water, sit down, we'll get to you. I watched a whole Rafael Nadal and Federer Grand Slam final, which was like 4 hours. And I'm like, it still hurts, but I'm going to go home because you're not seeing me, obviously. And in that moment, I think that's when what I was thinking about at that moment was, what if this goes wrong? What if this is the worst mistake I ever make? What if I do this and my dreams don't come true? Or what if all these negative things, all the fear, all the fear was kicking in. It was not like, oh, you're taking an inspired step. You'll you have faith along the way. Like, this is the path you're supposed to take. There was none of that. It was getting so caught up in the fear. And like you said, like if I just stood on the edge of that cliff or on the edge, I would have never have taken that step, which then led me to X, Y, Z, or where I am now. It would always be like, yes. And the most reasonable thing was to stay home, was to go back and get a job and not pursue my soccer career. And it didn't work out. So looking back now, people, if they've never taken those risks, would go, oh, I would have stayed in the, in the reasonable thing. But for me, it was like, looking back, even if I did do that, I would have regretted not taking that risk for the rest of my life. And like what it's then led to are so many incredible things that have come from there, because it was always aligned to me that this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's really not, it's not at all ever about the outcome. You know, if you're living your life based on outcomes, you're missing the point. You really, and it's like a cliche thing that many wise people say, but it's for a reason, that if your attachment is in that one moment where you have achieved something that you feel is going to transform your life, you've completely missed the whole point of life, which is all of the steps that you take to that destination. You know, even if it doesn't actualize the way that you think it will, it's not about that. It's about the calling in your heart and following that, and the journey that takes you on, and the stories that you make in the process of pursuing, what's in your mind's eye, what's in your heart. That's the thing that's defining your character. That's the thing that's bringing richness to your life, not the thing itself.
Yeah, amazing. How can we choose love more?
Okay. I like to keep it really simple. I like to explain things in a way that is simple and easy to grasp. So here's a really practical way of conceptualizing this. Even though you are making thousands of choices every day, all of those choices can be boiled down to essentially two choices: love or fear. Zeros and ones. It's a very binary experience. And love is the choice to lean into a moment and to choose not what is easy, but what is expansive, what's actually giving you access to more. And the choice of fear is the choice that feels rigid and restrictive and inflexible and contracted. And this is a very visceral, like it's a visceral experience. You know when you're choosing fear, when you start to become aware of it in your body, and your thinking as well. I often teach that there's only two reasons why we don't choose love. The first is that we're not aware of what love looks like or what love actually is. And the second is sometimes we know what love looks like, but we don't actually have the capacity to choose it. Kind of like if you've had a fight with someone you really love and you know that it's the right thing to do, to like call them or go up to them and give them a hug and reconcile the conflict. But something in you is just like, I just can't do that. I'm not a big enough person to do that. Sort of like this. The only way to train that capacity is to make those choices. And even if you start with really little choices, over time, your capacity, and actually on a very physical level, your nervous system will start to strengthen and expand through making those expansive choices. So that's how I kind of see it. And this practice, honestly, I've tried many different practices, and many different practices I think are absolutely amazing, from yoga to breath work to surfing to strength training, and all of these things I still integrate into my life daily. But the most profound practice I've ever implemented into my life is this moment to moment awareness. Am I leaning into the moment or am I not? And through keeping that in my mind, it's simple, it's ever present, and it's sending me on a step-by-step pathway to more and more and more expansion in each moment. And it's holding me accountable for my choices as well. So this means even when someone has done the wrong thing by me or betrayed me, rather than being a victim of that situation, I'm still in an awareness of, well, how am I going to respond to this? Am I going to contract? Am I going to go into blame? Am I going to be a victim of the situation? Or am I going to take responsibility for my practice, which is to choose love, because that's my spiritual directive. And this says more about me than anyone else in the situation. It just allows me to navigate situations with so much more ease. It's like a compass that makes everything feel easier. And even when there's a resistance in that, you kind of get into a rhythm of this practice where you recognize that as soon as you make the choice, the resistance disappears anyway, and you've become a bigger person. So yeah, that's my advice on how you choose love more.
Yeah, and it sounds like when you are in the opposite, when you're in the resistance, the hate, the judgment, in the attachment of those things, that's what you do feel your body contract. Like you feel like you don't want to open up. And I guess where a lot of people are talking about that I see on social media is I don't want to be vulnerable because I can get hurt. And it's like, but if you're being vulnerable from a place of love, you know, you're not putting yourself in a vulnerable situation. You're not holding on to hate or putting yourself in a situation like that. When you're in love, it's like acceptance, it's love, it's, you're not judging from there. You're like you said right at the start, allowing yourself to be seen and heard, and also other people as well to be seen and heard.
Yeah, I think this is a powerful and important point. Like this idea around vulnerability. When you're in truth, you know, truth is the greatest protection. So even though it can feel really vulnerable to state our truth, because it's you're exposing yourself. You know, the word actually means, when you go back to the origins of the word, it means to be exposed. Um, and it used to be used in the context of a wound, like an exposed wound. But in that, that's the only space where a wound can actually breathe and heal, right? When it's seen and it's drawn, when you acknowledge it, right? So in our vulnerabilities, when we step into our truth, even when that feels vulnerable, it's your greatest armor, because you can't fuck with truth. The truth has nothing to prove. You know, even if someone has an opinion about your truth or an opposing view, ultimately, like within your own truth, it's sort of irrelevant. And this is like what I hope everyone eventually gets to realize and experience, is your truth is the most powerful thing, you know, to choose that within yourself. It's not about what other people think. It's about what that is for you. And when you follow that, you know, you won't be for everyone. I'm not for everyone. Carly's not for everyone. You're not for everyone. That's fine. Like, that's cool. It doesn't mean you have to edit and change yourself. It's about staying true to you and the right people. You know, I've learned this in leadership, that being a leader of my own life and demonstrating my values and what I know to be true within me has meant that it's become so much easier to bring teams together that are aligned, because I'm demonstrating it from the top. And people will see that. Leadership's not a badge you wear. It's not, you know, all of these things that people think leadership is. Leadership is simply you showing up and demonstrating what is most true for you, and then being okay when people don't agree with it.
And such a powerful thing to realize and then also be aware of, because then you know, a lot of people these days that I do see and work with, it's that for so long not being able to realize that is then holding them back from expressing their truth, being vulnerable, and then that's holding them back from the things that they really want to feel and do and the people they want to attract into their life. It's kind of like the limiting version of themselves that they could be.
Yeah, for sure. It's the fear.
Mm.
By not choosing love, which is to align yourself with what is true for you. And that's love for you, and ultimately love for everyone else, you know, because when you're not in that, even if you believe that compromising your truth is keeping the peace in your relationships are kind of a house built on cards. Sorry to break it to you and be so brutal about it, but your relationship won't sustain. At least it won't sustain in a healthy way, because there's you know, honesty. There's not honesty there. There's not light. There's darkness, and that leaves holes, and it leaves space for things to fall down.
That's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go into. But I love it. I love that you touched on that too. So what is the worst thing that's ever happened to you, and how is that the best thing that has ever happened to you?
Wow. I so don't think in this way. So that's
Yep.
actually a really hard question. I've trained myself so deep into just like the isness of all things.
Yep.
But I can't, like, nothing comes to mind when you say, what is the worst thing?
What is the most challenging thing that has ever happened to you, and how is that the best thing?
Honestly, I feel like I get challenged more and more every day. Like, that's the honest truth. I can pinpoint, obviously, like, periods of my life of extreme adversity, like, being in the grips of anorexia was literally like living in a prison, having my whole worldview boiled down to um, the couple of hundred calories that I was allowed to eat that day, and being in a total mindset of truly deserving punishment if I wasn't able to stick to that. That is a struggle that I don't think I'll ever fully be able to put words to. The pain and the suffering that existed within that. It taught me about my tenacity. It taught me the power of the mind. I don't think that I would have become as passionate about understanding the mind and understanding meditation if it wasn't for that. Like, I guess, to give a little bit of an insight, everything about you as a human being physically is designed to be fed. So when you're in a state of starvation, most humans would do anything to alleviate that starvation. And yet I held myself in that starvation, and I actually convinced myself that feeling of starvation was an elated feeling. And when you think about how powerful your mind can be to override what is innately programmed into our physicality as a human being, to actually completely train myself. I trained myself to have an opposite association with those feelings of starvation. It was really fascinating. And I came out of that, and I still know today that anything I set my mind to, I will accomplish. It really did show me that I'm capable of achieving anything, and if I can see it in my head, then it's already mine. It's already real. So I guess there's one example, but every day in my leadership, I'm challenged. Like, I'm challenged in patience. I'm challenged in unconditional love. I'm challenged in humility. I'm challenged in intelligence. All the areas. And the more my team grows, as a leader, you realize your community and your team just mirror you in every single way. And if you have a problem with any of them, it's actually a problem that exists inside of you. So it's a journey of fully being 100% responsible for my experience of reality, really, I would say, is my biggest challenge, just stepping more and more into that. And because I'm aligning with such a vast vision of engaging 350 million people, I am challenged every day to become a leader that is capable of that, and to bring that vision of my future into my present moment experience, so that I'm showing up as if it's already happened. So the universe is throwing me challenges all the time.
Yeah, but it's such a great attitude and perspective to have, because you're like, I know these are going to happen, and me getting to the next level of where I want to be to lead it, this movement is going to come with that. But you're not looking at this is the worst thing ever. It's like, no, it's all reflection of me, and it's all me becoming more aware of things within myself to then move
Yeah,
me into more love.
yeah, it's a gift. It
Yeah.
really is. Like, we will always have problems. This is the thing, is so many people are like in this mindset of, if I just solve this problem, then my life will be good. It's like, no, you will always have problems. The best we can do is upgrade our problems.
Yeah.
Truly, we can go from having the problem of, what am I going to have for lunch? Why isn't that guy texting me back? To, how can I change the world? How can I enroll 350 million people in the message of love? Like, both of these things are problems. They're just at a different level of thinking and a different level of being, and a different level of availability. And when you realize that, and you accept that, okay, life will always have challenges. It's a hard thing to accept, but when you can finally get there, you're like, okay, I cannot absolve all problems. I can't absolve all challenges, but I can transcend suffering. I fully believe that. Suffering is a choice. Pain is not a choice. We all have to go through pain, but we don't have to suffer. When you accept those really difficult principles of life, everything will change for you, because you'll start to align yourself to much more dynamic, ambitious visions and goals for your life and your future, and recognize that everything that's coming into your path that is a problem or a challenge is actually there to equip you, just like you just shared, to up level you, and to see it like that. Like there really are. I think Kendrick said it in his song Humble. There's levels to it. You and I know. Pretty sure I'm talking to Jay-Z. Anyway, that's a segue. But Kendrick gets it. There's levels to it. You know, there's levels to your consciousness. There's levels to your awareness. When you start meditating, you realize that you're not your thoughts. You develop another layer of your awareness. You can observe your thoughts, but the longer you do that practice, the deeper your curiosity gets. Well, what's behind my witness? What's behind the observer of my witness? What's behind the observer of my witness of my thoughts? Like, it's just this never ending thing. Awareness just keeps going and going and going, but every time it's like a spiral upwards. You keep increasing your amount of awareness, so that when you're showing up in a moment, your presence is so there and so present that you start to realize, and here's the goal, you start to realize that everything that you want is always right in front of you. Your awareness might not be at a place yet for you to see it, but as you go on the journey of improving and increasing your awareness, you start to see that literally God is great in that way. That, you know, the divine force of the universe, of love, is always putting everything that we've ever wanted right in front of our eyes, and it's always out. It's there for the taking.
And it's man, what a perspective, a powerful perspective to have, that you're literally then the creator of your life.
Yeah.
And you get to choose what you want to face and what you want to create. And it's kind of like that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, but it's also, you know, when the student's ready, the achievement appears, or the thing that they're searching for appears as well. The awareness that you gain from thinking that way. Would you say you're living your purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can other people live and find their purpose?
I don't feel you find your purpose. I feel your purpose finds you. And I also appreciate that that's been my experience, because I was so cracked open. I was available to it. And I feel like you have to transcend the shoulds of what you think you should be doing, or how you think life should look, or you know, what you think you deserve. You need to kind of let go of all of that expectation and really just start to be available. And, you know, right now, because so many of us have time more than we've ever had to actually self-reflect, this is the first time many of us in a Western civilization have actually had time away from the hustle of everyday life. Use this time to ask those questions. Like, there's literally no better time than right now to ask, like, and you can say, like, I've had times in my journey where I've said to something greater than myself, and I truly believe that if we want to find our higher purpose, we need to believe that there's something greater than us. Like, yes, you are the creator, but you're also in a symbiotic relationship with something bigger than you, whether you want to call that the quantum field or God or divinity or love. I kind of see it as all of the above. It's all the same thing. There have been times in my journey where I've literally said, you know, to that energy, please use me for your will. You know, show me what you want to do with me, how you want me to serve you, and the, you know, the greater good of all humanity. And if you make yourself available, if you start asking those questions, you will find the answers. Many of us just don't ask the questions.
What is the best advice you've ever been given?
The best advice I've ever been given. Think the opposite.
Give me some context or an example.
At the time when this person said that to me, it didn't completely land what they meant. And then over time, going through my journey, I realized that, you know, the truth is always when you look at two sides of the one coin. together, and whatever you've been taught, challenge it. You know, and if you immediately get told something, think the opposite of whatever you're getting told, and then realize that the truth exists in the spectrum of that whole of the whole. Um, sort of hard. I don't know if I'm doing a very good job of explaining. I know what it means to me. It's being able to look at things from the perspective of unity and oneness, and not always looking at this or that, realizing that actually you can have both. You know, like you don't need to choose between this thing and that thing. That you can have anything you want when you know how to frame it correctly. But we just, again, we don't ask the question. We've been so conditioned to just see this or that, to think in this kind of binary, limited way. Whereas we learn when we can think, when we can see the polarity of all things, and we can see the space in between, and we can realize that we have access to all of that, then really the magic starts to happen, because you realize that, yeah, there's infinite possibilities.
And like you were saying before, when you have that awareness, then you can start to choose from love, not from just one side of whatever's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
That's when you do tap into your intuition and go, what feels right for me? What is more expanding rather than what is more contracting?
Yeah.
What advice would you give your 16-year-old self?
Um, if I had my 16-year-old self in front of me, I wouldn't advise her. It would be no advice. It would just be, see you, and you're enough. That's it. Just probably not even say that. It would just be a feeling. I've actually done this many times in meditation. It's a very powerful thing to do if you've never tried it before. Visualize these younger versions of you, and then step into that scene as you now, and just be with yourself. It's really powerful.
I love that. I do it in one of my meditations where I take people back to kind of like the 6-year-old version of them
Yeah.
and just giving them a hug. It's probably what we all needed, a bit of love
Yeah.
and a big hug back then. What impact do you want to have on people, the community, and the world? These 350 million people, what is the impact you want to have on them?
When we get to that, that's critical mass. So really, like, the impact is changing the trajectory of our evolution as a species. So my team and I work to completely shift the timelines of how we evolve, to sort of eliminate all systems and paradigms that are currently built on fear, and move into a state of unity and love. Like, my deepest hope and dream is that the polarity of love is no longer fear, that it's love and light, not love and fear, that we can actually exist in a vibrational reality where all we have is love and light. I truly hope that one day when I have kids, for instance, I will have to explain to them what fear is, because it's so foreign. You know, like back in the day, this was how humans thought. These were the ridiculous decisions they made, and injustices that were created because of fear. And for them to look at me and not understand because it's so foreign to them.
Wow. What does it mean to be conscious?
I find this one so funny because, I mean, everyone is conscious. You are conscious. You just have to realize what you already are. You know, it's self-realization, I suppose.
Yeah, I love that so much. I want to wrap this up by saying I appreciate you, your time, your energy, your wisdom, your impact that is so burning to create and to go do. You've done such incredible things, from, you know, taking those leaps and being of service to others, but it's being of service to yourself first, and aligning with love. And although that it doesn't just happen with a snap of, you know, your fingers, it's a process and a journey. And as you said, it's about, you know, enjoying that journey and always going back to that alignment of the awareness of you have a choice and you can choose love in all these things. And I think right now it's needed more than ever. So what you're doing is incredible. I loved you ever since I met you. So there's always love that's been there. And yeah, I can't wait to support you on your journey. So thank you so much for joining me and for sharing all your wisdom and your journey with us.
Thank you, Carlo.
You're
Thanks.
so welcome. And for everyone that's listening, how can they connect with you? How can they follow the movement? How can they get in touch with everything that you do?
Great question. I'll try and give a couple of simple directives. Probably my Instagram, Nick Gibson _, and you can jump in our Facebook community. That's a pretty great place to start. Love Out Louders, LOUDERS, and you'll find all of our other links through there, or love-outloud.com is our website.
Awesome. And if anything has resonated with you, has stood out to you, has triggered you or inspired you, take a screenshot, put this on your Instagram story, share this with a friend. We want to share that message of love and also all the other bits of golden wisdom that was in this. So thank you again, Nick. I love you so much, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Bye.
Peace.